at the end of the day, I don't believe there's ever been a victim in all of eternity, and that is very challenging to people, and I get it and get why. However, it doesn't change the fact that I believe we've all signed up for everything that we experienced, because when you're signing that contract, you're like, oh yeah, I'm an eternal infinite being. I ain't scared, whatever. Now we forget that. Here we come, we have amnesia. It's traumatizing, it's painful, and the sweet's never quite as sweet without the sour. And so, what it's all leading to is for the win, the love to mean something. Otherwise, if that's all there is, it becomes meaningless.
Hey, Guy here. Welcome back to my podcast. My awesome guest today is Brandon Beachum. Brandon was introduced to us by a mutual acquaintance of ours, and I really enjoyed it today. He's a man after my own heart. He's an entrepreneur, spiritual teacher, and really practiced what he preaches. And I think that's what today's conversation about is that we can have all these tools and lean into and absorb this content, but where does the rubber meet the road? Where are we leaning into the road less traveled, and taking those courageous acts from the heart and soul as opposed to just from the mind, and whether they fear-based choices or love-based choices. And so much of the unconscious self is driving our life. And as we start to take command of it, we can really start to move the needle in our own life and feel our realities, and life starts to show up for us in more meaningful ways, or to teach us many things. And that's what we get into today. And not only about how his own journey and how he's implemented it in his life, but some deep topics too, and he says some controversial things along the fact that there is no victim in all of eternity, and he unpacks that, why he feels that is, and why from a soul's perspective, not just a head's perspective. So look, I'll be fascinated to hear what you think about this conversation. Please let me know in the comments below. And enjoy the show. Of course, we are running more events and more retreats throughout the year. If you want to come and join us in one of them, whether it be a one-day mini retreat or the 5-day experiences in Bali, Croatia, or northern New South Wales in Australia, check out the links below. It's all there coming up in 2024. Anyway, much love from me. Enjoy this, and I'll see you soon. Beautiful. Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Guy.
You're very welcome. I know you've been to Australia, you said about 7 years ago, kind of near my local hood. But I am always curious, if you are traveling and you sit next to a stranger and they ask you what you do for a living, how would you respond?
It's funny. It's very similar to on my podcast, Positive Head. I always ask my cliche opener. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" What do you say? So it's very similar. And was yours wasn't passion though. You said
what you do for a living. Yeah. It's a very common question when you meet someone, obviously, at a party.
Yeah. I would say my answer to that person would be, I do a few things. I'm a serial entrepreneur my whole life. And, and then I'd probably start rattling off. I run a co-living and event space in Los Angeles called the Mystic Manor with my partner, and have a travel company called Hello Vacay. And I do a podcast for almost 10 years called Positive Head. And, so those would probably be the things that would come to mind immediately when someone asked me. I wrote a book within the last couple of years. So a little bit of this, wow. A little bit of that.
Yeah, amazing. You certainly keep yourself busy. So I'm going to just flip it slightly then. So what would be your through line passion with all of that? What lights you up?
Yeah. Talking about consciousness and the ultimate nature of reality, teaching best what I most need to learn. I like to refer to it, because that's really for all of us when we're really lit up about something and sharing something, it's because we're sharing it with ourselves first and foremost, I think. And so, I think I've gotten the most joy and passion in life and helping to make an impact on other people's lives.
Incredible. And I'm keen to dive into your own journey in a moment as well, because, obviously we're kind of in a bubble, like the fact that you're, like when you said consciousness, that's what lights you up. That's why you're on the podcast. I love these conversations myself and things like that. And but before we get into why that lights you up, how would you define consciousness?
Great question. You went right for it, didn't you?
Why not?
So how would I define consciousness? I think consciousness is synonymous with intelligent awareness. I think, I've never really answered the question or had that question, what is consciousness? And that's really what we're trying to understand. Who, what, when, where did it come from? What are we, but at the end of the day, I think that's what comes to mind for me is an intelligent awareness and exploring the threads that I believe, of course, the consciousness that animates my form is the consciousness that animates your form. The separation between us is illusory in nature, and exploring what the implications of that are and how to sort of navigate with the truth of that reality. What that looks like for me is very exciting.
Yeah, beautiful. It is challenging. I'm curious to know how you formed that belief system within you, because I feel like when you think about 3D reality and the physicality of it all and the nature and the density of everything, it can feel very real, very separate, very fear driven, very like, holy shit balls, is life, why is it so fucking hard all the time? And,
right.
And on it goes. And then we can come to the complete opposite of that we're all one, we're all unity, we all come from the same source.
Yeah.
So for you, how did you start to come to that conclusion yourself?
Yeah, well, where it really makes a lot of sense to me, all the hardship that you're referencing. One of my favorite quotes I say very regularly on my show is smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor. And we all came to be skilled sailors, right? And so once you start understanding that contrast is necessary in order for, if consciousness is also synonymous with love, I think at the end of the day, all the puzzle pieces go back in the box. You trace it back to the root of the root of the root. What is source, God, the universe, higher self, consciousness, love? Well, if that's the heart, the beating heart of it, in order for that to mean anything, if all is one and all is love, that's essentially means it becomes meaningless because there's no other and there's nothing other than love. So now you bring in hate, you bring in other, you bring in something to measure it against, and it gives it some meaning. And so when you play with the idea that ultimately what we all are is untouchable, unfazable, this is an illusion, a dream that consciousness once created in order to know itself more fully. And at the end of the day, you can pretend to be hurt. You can, but you're let off the hook in the end. You're eternal and, indestructible. And so once you start, if that indeed is the nature of the situation in which we find ourselves as humans, and it's like, okay, now I want to really appreciate love. I think of, well, my brother is actually calling me here on my muted cell phone, and I can, it makes me think of a story. He was, years ago, he didn't pay a ticket, something, when early 20s, he didn't pay his ticket. It went years. It turned into a warrant for his arrest. He had no idea he had a warrant for his arrest. This, ticket. It was out drinking alcohol on a beach, which, he probably thought, no big deal. Well, if you don't take care of that, kid, that's going to come back and get you. So he gets pulled over years later. They're like, oh, you have a warrant for your arrest. They throw him in jail for like 4 days or 5 days. And he's one of the most sensitive people I know. And if not the most sensitive. So here he is in jail. I mean, he's traumatized by the experience, the energy, he gets out at, here in the States, they'll let you out at 12:01 just after midnight so that they can charge for another day, charge the state for another day for you being in. And I pick him up, 12:30, bring him home. I cook him. I don't know if in Australia you have Hot Pockets, but these really crappy little microwave, unhealthy processed food, right? So 1 a.m, 1:30, I get him home. He's like traumatized after being in jail for days. I cook him this Hot Pocket, really just like kind of garbage food. To this day, if you ask him what was the best meal he ever had, you know what he'll tell you? that Hot Pocket. Why? Because of the contrast of the experience he had just had, right? In jail, jail food, bad dudes like looking at him funny, wanting to, engage in fighting him and weird stuff, and he was so appreciative of this meal that it's, and he's had some really good meals over the years, and that's his best. And so I think that really kind of helps to sum up what's going on here. It's so easy for us to get caught up in the pain and suffering and negativity of, life. And I believe it takes the sting out a little bit when you apply the perspective, and this is happening by divine design. At the end of the day, I don't believe there's ever been a victim in all of eternity, and that is very challenging to people, and I get it and get why. However, it doesn't change the fact that I believe we've all signed up for everything that we experience, because when you're signing that contract, you're like, oh yeah, I'm an eternal infinite being. I ain't scared, whatever. Now we forget that. Here we come. We have amnesia. It's traumatizing. It's painful. And the sweet's never quite as sweet without the sour. And so, what it's all leading to is for the win, the love to mean something. Otherwise, if that's all there is, it becomes meaningless.
Yeah. Hence the skilled sailor. And as we go through the challenges.
That's right. And you become more through it.
And I guess you have to have the amnesia. Otherwise, you'll be kicking around all day. Just going.
Yeah, right. I'm not buying it. I'm not this Brandon Beachum thing, this Guy Lawrence thing. Like, yeah, whatever. You're not. I'm not convinced. I'm not. So yeah, I think it's a necessary component. It's part of the recipe, the formula, in order for the impact to the outcome that we're desiring to transpire. There's some level of that. And it's interesting because then you have people who they get to a certain point in the evolution of their journey. And I know people who have vivid memories of past life experiences, or I have friends that have had experiences by locating. I have a girlfriend of mine who she claims that when she goes to bed at night, a lot of times she'll live years, decades in another lifetime, and then wake up in the morning and she's back. Or in her waking consciousness. Like I always share this story. She said one time she was sitting at a piano and it triggered her into another lifetime in like the 1800s or something. And she said the way she described it, she's bilocated. She's in both lifetimes simultaneously, here and there. And there she said she was very depressed and sad and crying because her lover had left her, or her husband or something, something had happened. And she's playing the piano, weeping, sad. And in this life, as she's having that dual experience of both, she's sitting at a piano, which triggers it, and she starts playing the same tune, even though she doesn't know how to play piano in this life. She's just sitting at one. So, really interesting things and stories. I mean, I hear a lot of interesting stories and accounts. And of course, I've had some pretty wild things myself. I know you've mentioned you've had a Kundalini awakening, and I know that probably was not for the faint of heart.
No, it wasn't. No, it's fascinating. And that's, for me, is one of the joys of podcasting, because you get to, I think you'll be over episode 300, I think, by the time this goes out, right? And I know you've done like thousands, I'm thinking over 10 years, but you get to know, speak, and interest. And when you facilitate as well, you see things firsthand. Yeah. I always like Tom Campbell. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Tom Campbell.
I feel like the name sounds familiar.
He's got a strong following on YouTube. He's an ex-NASA physicist, and he actually studied under Bob Monroe in the Monroe Institute.
Yeah.
And he would talk about streams of consciousness like being information. And it was always fascinating to me because I remember reading in one of Bob Monroe's books that he was able to leave his body and then enter another body on another planet.
Wow.
And actually experience it from that. And
right.
So, when you start to hear that, you're like, come on. But once you start leaning into these experiences, like you say, possibility is endless.
Or looking at some of these people and say, okay, well, what's your life like now? Well, you're really well adjusted. You're really loving. You've done a lot of self-work. You're highly intelligent. It's like Hercules. She's a brilliant artist and very talented. She's not looking for attention, really. I have to pull the stories out of her. And actually some of her other, when she goes to sleep at night, other lifetimes will be in a completely alien body. like something totally different than humanoid.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So, because I'm keen to get on to what's happening on the planet now, but before we get into any of this stuff, I want to know a bit about your journey.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a defining moment? Have you always been intelligently aware that there's something more, or have you had to have a few knocks by the universe?
Yeah, there's been, I think because it's my dharmic path, there's some things set up along the way to help, kind of lead me to where I am now. But I began my journey in a very conservative Christian household. My dad I went to church my whole life growing up. And then at 11 or so, my dad became very spiritual. And so it turned into, overdrive. We would go to church 3 times a week, and very conservative Christian, kind of Southern United States conservative. And, it never quite sunk in with me as I got older and started I was always a little bit of a go to the beat of my own drum, do things my way, question things. And I went to a Christian college at the behest of my parents and ended up getting kicked out for being, a bad kid, quote unquote, normal. And, then I met someone soon after that who claimed to have some psychic ability. And I was very intrigued. I'd never come across this, and then I saw her demonstrate some things that seemed to, support her claim. Right. And now I'm really intrigued. So then I start reading books, okay, let me look into this some more. One of the first things I read, speaking of Bob Monroe and those sorts of things, I started reading, about out of body experiences. And then I went and started sharing with my brother I was just talking about. And he's like, dude, what are you smoking? You can't leave your body, And I'm like, well, I can't say I've done it, but a lot of people are claiming it, in this particular book. The guy says there's 2 ways to do it. He says you can do it through a meditation and these certain techniques, or perhaps easier is if you can become lucid in the dream state, awake in your dream, and then say, oh, actually, I'm laying in bed right now, and the real me is in bed, and this is a dream, and therefore I want to leave my body. He's like, you'll pop right out, and then you can go explore the astral realm. And he said, well, my brother was like, I think you're crazy, but I know what you're talking about with this lucid dreaming thing, because I did that as a kid. I used to become awake in my dream, and then I could affect the dream and all that. So at least that rang true to him, from personal experience. So he went from kind of making fun of me one day to the next day being like, oh my God, because we talked about it, I lucid dreamed for the first time since I was a little kid. And then I remembered what you said, say I want to leave my body, and I will. And I did. And next thing I know, I'm standing there looking at my body, and it's in the bed, and I'm like made of energy. I wave my hand in front of my face, and it freaked him out. I mean, he is never the first guy in line for the roller coaster. And so then it started happening to him, sporadically, some here and there. I'd get calls every now and then over the years, like, oh my God, I was just viewing this other civilization. And and then he gets scared and run back to his body. And so that was sort of, and then from there, I started having a lot of cool, confirmations. I have some really powerful synchronicity stories, spiritual breadcrumb stories, winks from the universe kind of thing, that have happened to me over the years. And those just kind of started increasing in amplitude and frequency. And, and I can only think because it was my dharmic path that as I started to read a lot of this stuff, it's like, of course, all is one. Of course it's structured this way. This makes so much sense, and just never went back, never looked back.
Yeah, right. And because you talk a lot about your entrepreneurship and different companies and different things you're doing, and you clearly doing good out there and placing all those skill sets into serving humanity as well. And were you then using, I guess, your spiritual path to help you lean into the entrepreneurship, or were they kind of working in tandem?
Yeah.
Many people daydream about living their life more on purpose and stepping into what they really want to be doing in that, but they freeze and they'll stick with what they know, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've always, I guess you could say I've never been risk adverse, really. And so I always, when I first started having my own spiritual awakening, you'll appreciate this. I I was like, oh my gosh, I'm one with the source consciousness that creates and animates all things. Okay, if it's all me, it's all extension of me, and I can do and be anything. What would I be? What would I pluck from the toolbox? And I thought, well, I would make music. I never made music. I was very passionate about music, so I started a band called Kundalini. And so then Kundalini, we formed in Nashville, Tennessee, where I went to college, and then moved to California, Southern California, met someone from California. And, speaking of psychics, I went to a psychic around that time. She goes, oh, you've got this path in music. You have this path that you're going to in working in Chicago in business. And my jaw hit the floor because I was planning to move to Chicago and work for my uncle in business at the time in college. And he goes, but there's this whole other path in California and music. And, thanks to, spiritual awakening and some psilocybin mushrooms a year or so later, I formed a band, and Kundalini all came out to Southern California. And that was, 25 years or so ago now. So.
Yeah. And then you just went from there, starting to create what you're doing.
Yep. And then it was like, different entrepreneurial things, worked for different people over the years and here and there, but mostly, okay, I want to manifest the abundance to create a lot of good in the world. Money is just energy. And, I've had a lot of ups and downs with that journey of, everything from, living on my friend's couch to launching a Inc. fastest growing private company in the United States, with 100+ employees, to getting offered to be bought out for tens of millions of dollars, to losing it all within 12 hours of a big offer coming over. I mean, a lot of, like a movie script, stories of betrayal and loss and wins and, all the ups and downs that my soul wanted to experience.
Wow. What do you think are the key lessons from all of that? To go on that roller coaster and to actually experience some of the wealth or the opportunities of wealth, to not having it all, to, doing what you're doing now or whatever. There must be some really valuable insights.
Yeah. Well, and I share all those insights actually in, I wrote a book a couple of years ago during COVID called The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. And happy actually to gift it to the listeners. If you go to goldenkey.gift, G-I-F-T, okay, and use the code LOVE at checkout, you can get the audio and or ebook. For free. And so the idea with the book is like, okay, I love to talk about this stuff. And over 25 years of deep exploration of the ultimate nature of reality, I want to create something concise. So, the book is about 100 pages or 3 hours to listen to on audio, and so let me distill down in this case, 8 keys that I came up with that from my personal experience that I've seen to living and alchemizing, a life that is fulfilling and really tapping into the abundance that is our birthright. The sort of the quintessence of our being, the essence of the essence is we are the power that created it all. We built this place, I believe. And so the only issue is it's kind of like a lot of us have turned off the tap, right? By design, so that you can experience it meaning something when it's back on again. So the question really becomes like, have you had enough of lack and limitation? And, have you gotten the medicine from that? Very useful part of it all. Great. Then you can, that's a question that's already always being posed to us, I believe. What part of it all do you want to experience next? And then learning how to do the dance between, manifesting and creating it myself and calling it in, along with, I believe it's sort of like a hodgepodge of manifestation. I believe that you have your sort of soul contracts that you signed. There's probably a lot of versions of Brandon from this moment forward, but probably not very many where I go on to be the center of the Los Angeles Lakers basketball team, right? And so there's a certain trajectory of a soul or an avatar or a particular human, I believe. So you take in, okay, what are sort of some of the built-ins with this human? What are sort of the karmic balances built in? What they do have control over, focusing their mind and energy in the right places. And you put all those into a stew and you get some sort of outcome, right? So I think it's a little more nuanced how what you
That makes sense,
experience
yeah.
is created.
How do we get to those nuances within us, though? Like, I feel very fortunate in some respects. I went through a deep spell of loneliness and feeling disconnected from the world. And it actually really, it was a big lesson for me. And it really allowed me to start to dive inward more and start to explore myself, because I'd explored all options externally, which wasn't working for me, right?
Yeah.
But then there was these aspects from doing that. There was a knowing that started to come through, and a trust. So then it gave me the courage to take the steps, but it felt congruent with my heart.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, I'm just creating abundance for the sake of it, or whatever. Like, what have you found with yourself, those nuances? What would help people to start to ponder on? Because quite often you'll hear people speak about financial difficulties. Oh, I don't have enough money. I'm never going to be able to do that. And that's a belief system that just stays there.
It's a story. Yeah. I think that's the most important thing that we can do, is start analyzing, these stories that we tell. That's the most important thing, is like, Henry Ford said it really well. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. You are such a powerful creator that, abracadabra translates to I create as I speak, right? Your words are your wands. You are spelling, you are casting a spell, right? And so it becomes very important to take a look at, what story am I telling? And it's, I can tell a very grandiose, open-minded, super positive story about one thing. And then, as my partner might point out sometimes, she's like, hey, Brandon, your story there is that you tell about this particular thing is really limited and really doesn't align with the rest of who and what you are and how you approach things. And it's like, wow, that really has become an unconscious narrative, hasn't it? So really looking at these, a lot of these things have been programmed. We're like software, right? We've been programmed with certain stories. So if you can become aware of conclusions that you've come to, right? And, I had a guest recently on the podcast where he brought this up, and it was a great way to say, to talk about looking at conclusions you've come to. And, I've got a conclusion that this plus this equals my circumstance equals hard, whatever. Like, this is how it goes for someone like me. This is what happens to Australians. Whatever it is, the story is, and trace back, like, that's a story that you told. And, like a really successful business partner I had years ago used to always say, goes, no, I understand we can't do it, but what would it look like if we could? So now you go from conclusion, which, by the way, let's look at quantum physics, right? We're made of light. This, you zoom in on us and what is happening. It's, you have basically, particles that go into a fixed position when consciousness observes it, and in a state of quantum superposition when it's possibility when it's not. So what if we went to your old conclusions and we superposition it, right? I understand this is your story and this is the way it is and it works, and reality has actually reinforced that, and therefore it's even more true because you've created and continue to see it, and this feedback loop of you reflecting you back to you. But what would it look like if it were different? What could be? Let's just get imaginative here for a minute. And now all of a sudden you go from a fixed spot where it's, now you put it into a state of possibility. You put it in a state of quantum superposition, in a sense, right? So I think that's really important for people to do, is to become more aware of the stories and conclusions that they've told and they've subscribed to, and then start questioning those with a state of curiosity. And, curiosity is love, right? And bring love to it. Oh yeah, no, I could see why I came to that conclusion and how it's been reinforced over the years. I wonder what it would be like if it were something different. And once you ask a question, now it goes from, once you decide, okay, we're getting married, all the other options go away. Once you say, well, maybe I'm going to play the field, just to use this as an example, options open up, right? So what if you're going to play the field and stop being married to the conclusions that you outgrew a long time ago? You outgrew that relationship. And you can thank it and appreciate that it kept you in lack and limitation. Great. Thank you for that. I don't need to hate or beat myself up for it. Yeah. That was a part of the journey. You don't dance to get to a certain spot on the dance floor. It's the whole experience. You don't listen to a song to hear the final note. Your life is that. Okay. Now we can start looking at a new relationship with a story. And I think that's key. It's key to really start unwinding some of this unconscious programming.
Yeah, it's beautiful analogy. I love it. So just riffing off this for a moment then, like, 'cause I imagine that expansive, that awareness, all this possibility when you're not sort of just fixated on this is the only way it could be, right? And bringing that intent in, how do we then, or how do you in your personal journey start to marinate and maintain that possibility as it comes to you, as opposed to going back into the old stories, the old paradigms?
Great question.
Right?
Great question.
Big one, huh?
Yeah, it's a big one. And, what happens, of course, is you're probably aware, as we start thinking in different ways, if you listen to episode 1 of the Positive Head podcast from 2015, now we're, as you mentioned, on episode 2300 or something. I said, guys, I'm doing this first and foremost for myself, because by talking, why am I here in the middle of my day talking to you, Guy, about this stuff? Because we're literally going into a vibrational pool together to elevate our vibration. Anyone tuning in is being impacted by our conversation because it has a certain frequency and vibration. That which is like itself is drawn. That which is like unto itself is drawn. So like if I have a guitar and you have a guitar and I play it here all the way across the world through the microphone and you're holding the guitar, the same string will start vibrating, right? Because it's in resonance. So one of the things to do, the most powerful things we can do, is realizing like, those old stories have neural pathways in the brain. They're like well-worn paths, that familiar territory. All of a sudden you start thinking something different. It's creating new connections and new pathways that need to be well trodden in order to create more comfort and familiarity. And then next thing you know, it becomes, this is my default to always say, hold on, I'm holding on to something that is limiting in its possibility. Let me let go of my grip on that. Let me open up to possibility. Let me play. One of the only Bible verses I ever quote: "Lest you become like a child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven." How do I become more childlike? What do they do? What do children do? They play. They imagine. They're using this superpower to create worlds with a cardboard box and in a pen. It's a sword. And, they're literally, and they're having the time of their lives and the experience to go along with it. And so that's really what we're being invited to do. Step back into our childlike wonder and possibility and do things like listening to Guy's podcast or reading a book that is literally shifting your vibration the same way as if you pluck that guitar string, you're swimming in a certain pool. So become aware of how frequently you're swimming in that pool, what pool you're in.
And another one that I know people are fearful of is then their lives around them changing, maybe their friends or people, relationships. It's like, well, their whole, that vibration might not match anymore.
Yeah, right.
Wanting to,
that's right,
to elevate.
Yeah.
I'd love you to comment that even on your own personal journey. And
yeah. It's a very valid concern. We get very attached as humans too. Romantic relationship is the best example of this. Our human gets attached, right? And I believe, and there's a big misconception, I think, out there that a relationship has to last forever in order to be successful. And I don't believe that at all. I believe you come together for the opportunity for growth. When that opportunity has fully realized itself, a natural separation occurs. And then our human, which gets very habitual and comfortable and doesn't like change and has fear, doesn't understand, you can't lose. Like, you are literally God experiencing itself. And at the end of the day, self-love is the number one thing to learn, because you're a fractal of source right? And what is source? Alone. It is literally a story of self-love. So for all of us, the number one thing we have in common in our varied path is we're all here to get better at self-love, because at the end of the day, it's just you. You know, I saw a meme the other day. It's like realizing, it was like a philosophical like statue or something, and it was crying. It was like, realizing I'm the only one. And then the other side of it was realizing I'm the only one with it, you know, its arms wide open. What perspective are you seeing with that? And so, you know, at the end of the day, you can't, the only thing in eternity guaranteed is change. The good news is whatever you fear to lose or is going to fall off because it's no longer a vibrational match, whatever that is can always come back around and will come back around in a more evolved form. That's a reflection of because it's always, everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. It's always going to be you reflecting you back to you in some way, shape, or form, because it's all an extension of self, the one. Mm-hmm. And so you just need to get comfortable with this truth, because this is the you know, situation which we all find ourselves in eternity. You know, Chogyam Trungpa said it well. He goes, the bad news is you're falling through space. Nothing below you, nothing to hold on to. The good news is there's no ground. And that's really what is happening. You're falling, nothing to hold on to. The good news, there's no ground. No parachute. Good news, no ground. And you know, it's really powerful. And you need to find your comfort level with this, because this is the nature of the situation in which you will be forever.
Ain't that the truth? It's funny. You really took me back, because dear friend, she's passed now, but at the time she was there not long after when I had the awakening, and she was very spiritual. And she said, Guy, it's okay, mate. You just skydiving, but you'll never hit the ground. They were her words to me.
Oh, wow.
Just learn to enjoy it.
Wow. Yeah, there it is again, right? Beautiful.
And I was like, wow, it's easier said than done when you.
Well, yeah, like that's right. It's one thing to know this stuff theoretically, and what we came here to do is really live it, really experience it. What we are is not for the faint of heart. And this is what we came to do. This is what we're doing. This is what we're always doing. And, you know, what you've made it through up to this point in hearing these words, literally eternity is behind you that you don't recall, you know, and yet here you are, you made it, right? And you'll always make it, and you can't not make it, because you are it.
Yeah. How do you deal with the free falling, the surrender, the letting go of the expectations? And
very carefully, to the best of my ability. You know, I get better and better at it, I suppose. And it's just like anything. Our nervous system gets acclimated when we're growing. You know, the first time you get in front of hundreds of people every month, right? You said, think of where you're at now. You've been doing that for quite some time, I assumed from our combo.
Yeah.
Think back to the first time you did it. Your nervous system was probably a hot mess. Just like, you know, you're literally stretching a growth edge, and it's so nerve-wracking and challenging. Then you do it again. Then you do it again. Then you do it again. And next thing you know, you get, your nervous system gets acclimated, because you've stretched it, and now you've caught up with, you know, it's like the weird, you know, 14-year-old who over, you know, 6 months, he grows 6 inches, and it's like, what is this? You know, the puppy tripping over its paws. It eventually catches up with that growth and starts to get familiar with it. And that's really what we're doing. And the growth never ends. So you're going to make it to plateaus of like, oh, I'm here. And then eternity erupts in a vista before you that never, you know, the next plateau as you ascend into the next greatest and grandest version of self. And so this is the dance, you know, and, you know, I get better at it the same way everyone does, time and practice. And then, you know, and it's easy, you know, to get hard on ourselves. And I think that's one of the most key things that hold us back, is if we beating ourselves up about, you know, our progress. And really part of the dance, it's a spiral, right? We circle back on things we think we've already outgrown and worked through for deeper, we're like an onion, deeper levels of release around it. It's like this 2 step forward, 1 step back, you know, shimmy that we do. And I think understanding that is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that in mind as well, and we're into 2024 now. It's going full on, and there's a lot of noise as well going on at the moment on the internet and different things. I don't watch media, so I don't really pay much attention. But do you feel like we're actually going through a shift in humanity right now? You got elections this year. There's all sorts of predictions starting to happen. It's going to get noisier. There's going to be more mudslinging, more fear, more division.
Yeah.
How do you see it all playing out? Or,
here's how I kind of think of it. It really helps me, because it can be easy to get lost in, oh my gosh, I'm one of 8 billion people on this planet, and what difference can I make? And it's so much bigger than me. And, how few people are even awake or aware out there, relatively speaking. It's like all can look lost. And, the way I think of it is if I believe, and I talk about this, in my book, I'm the lead actor, director, star in my own private YOU universe. God, source, higher self is so vast. I have my own universe. And you're a prop in my movie. And so is the world at large and everyone out there listening. I am the star here, and vice versa. I'm a prop in your movie created in this image to sound like this, to look like this, but it's really just you reflecting you back to you in some way, shape, or form. And so, of course, I make it. Of course, I'm the only one here. It's like I'm the star of this show, and we all are, and from this perspective. And it's like, so you think if you want to change the world, change yourself, because the world is showing up as a reflection of you in some way, shape, or form. So understanding, that by doing the work on myself, literally, and Bashar talks about this, who I had on, Daryl Anka, who I had on my show recently, that we're shifting in and out of different timelines constantly, just like a movie, picture that's flickering so fast. The light's flickering so fast, it appears solid, but it's really just flickers happening. That's what your atoms are doing. The particles that make you up, they're vibrations, not solid at all. They're 99.9999% space. And what we call solid are flickers, this flickering in and out of existence, popping in and out. We don't know where it comes from or where it goes to, but it's intelligent when it shows up here. That's what you're in a movie, right? And you get to shift and decide what version of it you step into based off of where you're resonating. Because the only thing you really have power over is your perspective and your inner world and your inner dialogue. And as within, so without. So when you start talking about the world, there is no out there. It's a reflection of my internal state. So the more I work on myself, the more I'm going to like the things happening and transpiring out there. And by the way, if I'm doing great work on myself and something awful happens out there, who am I to judge good or bad? Like, it's like, do I really know what, one of my favorite stories that ties this. Have you heard the story of the Taoist farmer?
Oh, please share it anyway.
Yeah. It's a great one. So, the Taoist farmer who has this sort of perspective in this ancient philosophy that sort of believes in the way we've been talking on this show, and the philosophies and ideas. Someone came up to him, he's a farmer, and one day he has one horse that helps him to till his field, and it ran off. And his neighbors witnessed this, who are thinking very, I always say, we're playing checkers and our higher self is playing chess. So the neighbors thinking very, one-dimensionally, come over and say, oh my gosh, we see your horse ran away. You're screwed. Without that horse, you're an old man. You need that horse to till your fields. You're done. The Taoist farmer, having a broader view, maybe so. I trust the mystery. I trust, who knows? We'll see. Next day, the horse comes back, and a wild horse followed it back. So now, apparently fortunes have changed. He went from having one horse to no horse to 2 horses. Now he's got double the horsepower. The neighbors witness this, come over and say, oh my gosh, we thought you were screwed, but now we realized you're blessed. You just doubled your workers. What does the Taoist farmer say? Maybe so. Who knows? We'll see. What's good or bad, right? The next day, his son, his only human helper, tried to tame the wild horse, gets thrown, breaks his leg. Neighbors witness this, come over and say, oh my gosh, we thought you were screwed. Then we thought you were blessed. Now we know you're screwed because without your son to help you, your one human helper, you're certainly finished. Dallas farmer says, maybe so. Next day, the military comes around looking to gather up all the young men to take them off to be in the front lines of the latest war, surely to die. They come to scoop up the Dallas farmer's son, who's laid up with a broken leg in bed, and he's no good to them, so they leave him and pass him by. He survives. The neighbors come over, say, oh my gosh, now we see you're so blessed. What does the Dallas farmer say? Maybe so. So when you're judging these ideas are good or bad, just when the butterfly thinks its world has come to an end, the caterpillar thinks its world has come to an end, it becomes a butterfly, right? So a lot of times old things have to dissolve and break in order for something new to be born. And so if we're judging something from this very, myopic, narrow lens, we're not understanding a greater picture. And if you can move into a state of, as one of my keys in the book, in my book is trust the mystery. I don't understand it, but I trust it. Now you start navigating from a place of just being held in the mystery. And it's a powerful place to be.
Totally. Yeah. I think as well, there's a fine line for me on my journey anyway, of avoidance and then using the work as a way to escape.
Yeah.
Of not facing.
Yeah. Right.
Things.
Yep.
To then actually sitting with it and being a representation of what you want to see in the world.
That's right.
Right.
All I can do for you is work on myself. All you can do for me is work on yourself. As Ram Dass said, it's like, so how can I be the thing that I want? Be the change, be the example, live it, change the vibration. And that's how we're going to change the world. That's how, and when you think in terms of shifting in timelines all the time, I talk about this in the book too. I believe our life plays out at the corner of free will and destiny. It's destined because time is an illusion and it's all already happened. And I think that's how you get into psychic ability and things like that. However, if a psychic ever tells me or intuitive ever tells me this is definitely happening, I run the other way because I believe there's many timelines. Just like the woman who said, I see you in a cold place like Chicago in business. I was planning to work in Chicago in business with my uncle. That floored me. Oh, there's this whole other timeline in California in music. So based off of the choices I made, this is the version that I experienced this time. And so you start understanding there's all these timelines from this moment forward. I could be saying, Guy, the world is finished, doom and gloom. It's all awful. And you could say, no, Brandon, I believe we're coming, we're birthing into a new enlightened era. And 10 years from now, I'm the person sitting here is in a timeline where it's doom and gloom and awful. And you're sitting in the utopian version, right? And by the way, there may be another version of Guy there who wasn't so positive and vice versa, So that's how I view it and how personal the universe and your experience is. And even if it doesn't show up the way my limited little human mind can imagine is quote unquote best, if there were such a thing, I know better. I know enough to know I don't know much and that I trust the mystery of what will unfold and happening ultimately for love.
Yeah, beautiful, Brandon. And the one thing I want to highlight as well is that you're actually doing something as well. You're out there creating positive change as well, which is
I call it the good kind of selfish. It's the good kind because what I do for any other person, anyone who benefits from this show is literally an extension of me. And by helping them, I helped myself. Whatever. If you want to know how to get ahead in life, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others is what Gandhi said. And the reason I believe that holds true is because there are no others. So it is in giving that we receive. People out there, I don't know my path. I don't know what it is. Wait for it. Be open. And I can tell you this, I can definitely tip you off in this way. It's going to involve service in some way, shape or form, because that's the only way to receive is in giving to the other extensions of self.
No, exactly. And as a dear friend of mine said to me, it's not hard to be kind. So that's of being service. If you're simply just present with someone.
That's right. Holding space is a powerful thing.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be this grand theosis. I got to set up my business and do all these different things.
Who is more important, Gandhi or Gandhi's grandmother who raised him and helped make him who he, to use that example, right?
Exactly.
Who's more important to the world,
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't have been without that nurturing.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. I not heard that one before. I got one last question for you, mate, before we wrap things up.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, everything we've covered today, there's been a lot, but what would you love the listeners to ponder on? Leave them with.
Yeah, I love that question. It's so easy in today's world. You asked, we talked quite a bit about the state of the world, and in this social media era of comparison and followers and likes, and you're a podcaster too. How many downloads do you have? And how does it compare? All that numbers never end, right? Comparison never ends. I would encourage you, next time you see someone that you admire, you hear something here that you admire, the person on social media, wow, they're beautiful, what they're doing. Out of all the infinite things vying for your precious attention and energy, you're tuned into this podcast because you're such a close vibrational match to me and Guy. And we're like one specific family, everyone who ever hears this episode, right? Mm-hmm. Configuration of source. And so anything that shows up in your field that you like, instead of creating comparison, I say, wow, I'm such a close vibrational match, just like striking that guitar chord, that out of all the things I could be seeing, hearing, receiving, feeling is what's in front of me. I must be getting closer. Wow. So the difference between comparison and that is an extension of me that's getting closer and closer and closer, and just tying that truth and realization and perspective shift into the core truth that anything that you want, desire, believe, would like to manifest in your dream, this life, understand there has never been a soul more worthy in all of eternity than you. Because there hasn't ever been another soul. It's all an extension of you. So if anyone is worthy, you are worthy. And if you haven't thought that or felt that fully until now, or you're just starting to, congratulations on all the hardship that led you up to the point of remembering, coming back together with the truth of who and what you are. And because without the contrast, the sweet is never quite as sweet without the sour. And if you're hearing these words and you're feeling this last share on this podcast, is because you're ready to step more fully into that next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And congratulations on all the hardship you are bold and brave enough to sign up for as a soul to get you here, so it can actually mean something. You are it. You are worthy and so eternally loved.
Beautiful. Thank you, my man. Thank you. Can you say it out loud one more time where they could grab you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
For free?
Yep. Yeah. goldenkey.gift. GIFT. And if you use the code LOVE, LOVE, for the audio and or ebook, love to share that with you. And of course, you can find my podcast, Positive Head. And I believe we had a little hitch where we were going to record recently. And so you'll be able to catch Guy in the future on Positive Head as well.
Yeah. Beautiful, mate. I'll make sure the links are in the show notes as well. And thank you for all that you're doing. And it's great to finally connect.
Yeah.
Have this conversation.
Likewise. I look forward to next time.
Thanks, Brandon.
Bye for now.